Hello, it's Ken Utley again. Now we're going to introduce you to the graphical display reports within the SIMS for Windows. I've chosen an example database that consists of about 4,600 accounts along with the necessary history to build up this graphical capability. We can do this by going to Reports, Graphical Report. We're going to run our report from January 1st of the year 2000 to January 15th of that same year. Now notice we can include or exclude manual alarms. The default is to not include them, and we can also generate a detail log that will be located in the installation directory of the SIMS 2. This log could be used when you're trying to find out exactly which events were added into the statistical analysis and which were excluded. Let's go on and start this, and now we're going to go collect the names of all the accounts, and now we're going to start collecting history. We'll start out at the first full week of the January of 2000, which is 0106. We'll follow up with the next week of 0113, and then finally 0120. Also take note that I'm working on a single standalone computer and not across a network. So you're going to see some pretty quick action here, but I would expect that your action will be similar even across your network. Now when the statistical report first comes up, we're probably going to want to choose all so we can get a feel for these signals for all dealers and all groups. We can choose the groupings individually so we can see comparisons from one group to another for all of our graphs. For talking sake though, and demonstration purposes, I'm going to select all dealers so we get an excellent idea. Out of the approximate 4,750 accounts, actual history was found on 2,376. Now the first thing that we look at is the event allocation pie chart or the bar chart. But what's important to know here is this is merely the breakdown of historical records that was found. It's a good way to find out some basic concepts of what's going on. I'm going to go on and actually pull that down so we can do it. I'm going to rotate this just slightly so that we can get a straight up and down graph. For the historical type events, associated events are type 1s. If we go to the next one, auto-logged events are type 0s. Contact calls, I believe, are type 5s. But we start getting a feel, in this case, for during this period, 2,201 times an operator called a contact. Data entry events, there were 913 and so forth like that. So we get a nice breakdown of what's located within the history. Now let's get to some more important parts. Auto-logged versus exception events. This is extremely critical because this tells us of a total, let's say, for speaking purposes, of 100 signals that came in, 90 were automatically handled by the SIMS 2 monitoring software, whereas only just below 10% were exception events and required some sort of operator action. Now please take note that in the case of an LTC, which comes in as an exception event and then followed by a closing, which is an auto-logged event, that exception event requires no disposition. It'll be automatically removed from the traffic as other type groupings are, but it'll still be counted as an exception event for our statistical purposes. Now let's look at a couple of other things that we can do. We can animate, which means speed up and slow down the rotations of the bars or of the pie graphs. We can give depth, more depth or less depth to what we're looking at. We can control the three-dimensional look of the rotation and get an excellent feel. I'm going to slow down the actual speed here. Whoops. I'm going to slow down the actual speed here and take note that 81,800 of the events, almost 82,000, were auto-logged, whereas operators only had to deal with just under 9,000 events. Of those 9,000 events, I can look at my disposition pie chart and now get a feel of those 9,000 events and what it took or what they had to deal with. We can see that 0.41% of those were dispatches. We have no callback, revised cancellation. There are all kinds of examples, and remember, these are programmable. Yours are going to be probably much different, but it gives you a real excellent feel for the breakdown of what your operators are actually doing with these particular dispatchable or exception events. We can get a breakdown of the event types. We all know that we probably have somewhere between 125 to 175 different mnemonics within our system. This is the breakdown of how many times this mnemonic or each one of these mnemonics appeared during that 15-day period. I can advance them a little further. I could control my rotation so I get a straight on effect if I want to. So LOPs or late openings, I had only 256. Late closings, I had only 493. So we get some excellent information from this. Openings, I had 2,300. Phone test signals, 13,000. Again, we're starting to get more and more information, and after all, information is what this is all about. For the opening types of signals, we can get an excellent feel for, of all the opening signals, there were 4,700 accounts, total capability within the system, 1,204 accounts, as we can see down here at the bottom, contributed to this statistical display, of which 94.65% were normal openings, and only 4% were exceptions or early openings. And then we have the late openings and the late two opens representing the total amount. We have the same type of setup for the closing signal. Excuse me, let me get my group. There we go. For the closing signal, again, 94.3% of the closings were handled automatically, with early closings only representing 0.35%. Late to closes representing a total of 3.7% of the total closing type signals. We have a UL line loading bar chart. Now I'm going to slow this down just a little bit because I think it's a little bit more helpful. I can see that receiver 0, line grouping 2 has only had 4 signals. Now let's kind of move that on down here and get to some that are a little bit more meaningful. Receiver 4, grouping 0, had 1. Receiver 4, grouping 1, had almost 32,000 signals. Receiver 5, grouping 01, 8,600. Grouping 03, almost 16,000. So we start having an excellent feel, and of course you do have all the percentages over on the right, and we can look quickly, see that 35% of the total signals are represented with receiver 1 grouping 1, or receiver 4 grouping 1, and move on down. 15% receiver 6, line group 7. Start getting an excellent feel for those kinds of things. We can look at the different operator IDs and start getting a feel for how many signals that they've handled. So we know that on group ALB we have a total of 195 entry alarms, and so forth. Operator JOR, 1 fire mnemonic. So we can get an excellent feel for the way that totally works together. Seem to be one of our busier operators here. Excellent. Now let's come back and stop at the operator response bar chart. Again, I'll choose all groups to help fill in our spaces so we can get a little bit better understanding of there. Let's rotate that so it's fairly straight. If we could, I would stretch the screen out widthwise so you can see these a little bit more separation on these particular items here. But in here, we can see that the bright green here represents priority 3 response to completion time. They take about response to completion 46 seconds. They're fairly quick. The 411 seconds here is represented by priority 2 response to completion. Why would they be longer? There's more actions that have to be taken, more people that have to be called, and so forth. Remember, these are averages, not the longest or not the shortest. I hope this little demonstration has been helpful along these statistical reports, and I certainly want to thank you for your attention.